Mimi Nicklin, empathy, leadership, and the line that leaders must hold. I am absolutely thrilled, 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 thrilled to have our conversation today. Just thrilled. Mm.
Oh, thank you. You are so wonderful. I mean, just even talking to you before we came on air, I couldn't be more excited to spend my morning, which I know is your evening, together. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, I want to get right into it. Empathy is everywhere in leadership conversations right now. And yet, many of the leaders that I work with are kind of quietly asking the same question, which is
Mm,
how do I lead with humility and humanity and
mm,
empathy, all of those really important pieces, without losing clarity or authority or performance? So, how do you find the intersection between driving performance and empathy?
mm. Well,
Nothing like
firstly,
starting off, nothing
yeah,
like starting off
yeah.
right off the
If,
gate.
if I wasn't awake this morning, now I am, Anderson. But firstly, I'm so happy to hear you say that this is coming up in your conversations, right?
Mm.
Because only 5 years, probably less, probably three, maybe even two, it wasn't. So let's acknowledge that in the very beginning, which is that these conversations around empathy, leading with humanity, humility, this human first leadership is finally rising. And, thank golly for that. So I want to start by saying how wonderful that is to hear because our world needs it, Alison. We need this connection more than ever. As you say, I think our biggest barrier is understanding actually what this is
Yeah.
and how I use it. Because empathy is the path to performance. It's not, there's no clash there. Because in the end, empathy is a data set, right? It is the data set to be able to understand those you are leading, those that you want to perform or to be accountable or to innovate. So if we are leading people, which of course all of us are,
Yeah.
the first step to being able to do that is to understand them. And that's why I say one of our biggest challenges is defining what this is, because empathy is a skill set.
Mhm.
It's in the prefrontal cortex of your brain, and it is your ability to understand others. And if you don't understand them, how would you ever lead them? So that's where I would start.
I love that. And I love that empathy is the path to performance. So, when you hear the word empathy in leadership today, what do you
Mm,
think is most understood? Because I feel like empathy, much like coaching, much like strategy, they're overused words and they've lost their
mm,
power. So they mean
mm.
different things to different people. What do you think is the most understood part about empathy? And where do people go wrong with using empathy?
Look, I think people know because I ask people every day with my audiences, exactly this, right? I always start and I say, what do you think empathy is? And they all look at me like, you're the expert. Why are you asking us, right? But what they say mostly is the ability to walk in someone else's shoes, which is accurate, right? I mean, at an entry level, that is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about the ability to see the world through somebody else's perspective or lens, right? It's the entry point to empathy. So I think most people know that. However, what they also think, which is incorrect, is
Mhm.
that it's about emotions or being emotional. Number one, that's probably number one misconception. And number two is people are extremely confused about the difference between empathy and sympathy. So
Yes.
that is probably the number one question from my audiences. And because of that confusion, and we can clarify just now for your audience, but because of that confusion, that's where this conversation begins to blur for them. Because sympathy, which is an emotion, right? It's a feeling. I feel sorry for you. That does blur performance, right? That does blur decision making. That does lead you to emotional burnout. Because they don't know the difference, that's when they start to say, oh, well, I better not use it in case I can't make a decision or in case I can't make somebody redundant or refuse their pay rise.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
where it begins to unravel a little
It's a
bit.
bit of a slippery slope. And I feel like some people have over-indexed on it and they don't know how to bring it back to a nice, healthy, balanced middle ground.
Yeah, it's hard, and I think, I don't really like the term boundaries because I think it's one of those trending ones like coaching and all those other words that are thrown around LinkedIn. However, you do need to have lines in knowing when you are using your empathy and how. And often I will talk to the teams that I work with about where you find empathy in action. So, for example, in hostage negotiation or in war zones, in really hard environments. And, I always say to them, people don't go to battle to lose, right? They go to win, and they're teaching their armed forces skills such as empathy before they go into those environments. So, really looking at the toughest environments on earth and saying, these are skills that people use to rally people, because all behavioral change starts with connection of some form. If I do not trust you, if I do not have a connection with Alison, and you say, hey, Mimi, you should come visit me in New York. Well, no, I'm not going to because I don't trust you. Right. The minute we have a connection and you say you should come, I'll be like, yeah, do you know what? I should. Right. So if you don't listen first to people, no one will listen to you. And that's fundamentally what this comes back to.
What do you wish that leaders understood before they try to lead with empathy?
Well, I probably wish they understood what it is as a starting point, right? I wish that, and that's what I do every day, Alison. I get up every day and travel the world and leave my daughter and my home and all these things to try and ensure that more of us know what this is. So, what I wish leaders would know is that this is a hard skill set,
Yes.
not a soft skill. So, if you came to this podcast today thinking that empathy or emotional intelligence were soft skills, may this be the last time, because these are hard skills. They're hard to find, they're hard to maintain, and they have very hard business impact. For example, 21% higher profits, 68% higher levels of engagement, 34% higher levels of output. I can go on. When people feel seen, they rise.
Yes.
So actually, that's why I started saying this is the path to all performance, because you have to start with humans. You have to listen first.
I love that. How does somebody who is trying to navigate their way through leadership, being an empathetic leader, how do they practice? How do they build this muscle?
So I really do think it starts with listening first, because the backbone to all empathy is understanding.
Mhm.
And the only way I can understand is to listen. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. I meet so many leaders who, after who have heard, some sort of feedback that goes like this: you just need more executive presence. You just need more confidence. You just need more empathy. Well, where is that? Is it under the table? Oh, wait. Oh, it's over there. Oh, it's over there. And so it's how do you translate that word into an adaptable practice? Because it is like a muscle. And so
Mm.
where would someone start? I
It
think
absolutely is
I
like a
think
muscle.
I'm an empathetic leader. I think I'm doing okay, but I might have some troubles. What might I do to bring even more awareness to, yes, I know I can listen more, but what do I need to listen for? Because I listen every
Mm,
single day.
mm,
What should I listen for that's different? How do I shapeshift and be more present so that I can show up as somebody who really creates an environment where people are doing their best work of their life, all while feeling valued and invested in and allowed to grow? That's what I think all leaders should do and be. That's our nirvana. But for those that are not necessarily have found their way through this yet, when you talk about listening, how do people listen better?
mm. So the first step is to recognize that listening and hearing are very different things. So you just touched on then, Alison, when you were speaking, you said, I listen every day. But
Mm,
one of the things I learned in working with leaders is that I will do these master classes, and we talk about this. And in the first coffee break, nearly always, often a man, but not always, but there's just more men in leadership,
mhm,
will come up to me and say, Mimi, I just want to grab you. And I say, yeah, sure. How's it going? And he said, well, I'm really enjoying the session, but I just had a realization. I say, okay, tell me. He says, I don't think I've listened to anyone in my life. I say, don't worry, you're not alone, right? And this started happening,
Wow.
Alison, over and over again, all around the world. I'm very lucky. I work in 25 countries at least a year, so I travel from culture to culture, country to country, religion to religion every week. These
Hmm.
things are exactly the same everywhere, right? So the difference between listening and hearing is the first step. And really, what you're looking for is to question yourself and say, am I listening to understand or am I listening to reply?
Yes.
And what you'll find is that often we are listening to reply, right? We are waiting for our gap in the conversation to say, oh, but I think this, or that won't work, or how about that? And the
Hmm.
brain is an amazing thing. The brain can process huge amounts of stimulus at a time. But whilst it can hear many sounds at a time, so if I continue talking and started smashing a drum, you could hear both my voice and the drum. But you can only listen to one voice at a time. The brain can only process one voice at a time. What that means is if I'm listening to the voice in my head while you're speaking, I can hear you. I'm not listening to you because you know who I'm listening to? Myself,
Yes.
right?
Can't compute that.
Yeah, right. So
Wow.
that's really the first step is to really start to identify in your life how often you're listening to understand and you're really listening. And that comes from not just your ears, right? But from your eyes, from your body language. We can talk about some of that if you want, but
Yes. Yes.
how you create that connection
Mhm.
and how you ensure that when you're even on a screen like this, the audience that's listening to you, your host, is 100% sure that you are with them, right? That
Mhm.
you are listening to them. So I think that's where it starts from a mindset point of view, because as you said, these are skill sets, and therefore, the more you practice them, the more permanent they become. So
Mhm.
in English, we often say practice makes perfect. But I always say to people, don't aim for perfect
Yeah.
because we'll never get there. Aim
Never.
for progress, right? And the better you become at practicing listening, the better listener you become.
Mhm. And well, let's pull the string on listening. And I want to go because I think that listening is a full body experience.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So share a little bit about, like the body language of listening, the
Mm.
elements, not just listening with your ears, but with your senses so that you can really be in the moment and be able to dance in the moment with whomever you're with. How do you do
Yeah.
that? What do you need? What do you look for? What are those signals?
So I think eye contact is a huge one, and probably everyone in the audience has heard that before, but we underestimate it. Again, because I do this for a living, I practice it all the time, even on screen with you now, and maybe the audience can now watch my eyes, right, for the next little while. My eyes are extremely active always, right, when I'm talking to you, because I really want you to, people say that windows are the door to the soul.
Yeah.
And I think it's true, Alison, because the more open your eyes are, the more you smile with your eyes, the more you listen with your eyes, the more people respond. So eye contact's a really big thing. Many people struggle with it. So I have a little tip that I always tell them, which is to if you struggle to make eye contact, say at a networking event or a meeting, try and remember the color of somebody's eyes. Because in the split second that it takes you to really look and say, what color are their eyes in your head?
Mhm.
Obviously, they don't know you're thinking that. Um, you make connection because it forces you literally to look at their eyes. And subconsciously, as a human, we are made to respond to that. So in
Mhm.
that split second, it takes me to remember an eye color, you create connection. So that's my number one tip on eyes.
I love that.
That's easy, right? It's an easy one.
Well, and it
And
probably breaks down, it makes you release your shields that you have.
I think so. And people seem very nervous to make eye contact. And of course, in some cultures, Japan, for example, you wouldn't do that so much. It very much depends. And I think a huge amount of empathy and just listening first in general comes down to culture. But of course, if you're in a culture that you know well, so if you are an American in an American organization with predominantly American cultured people, as in you are sharing an American culture, these things are less necessary to shift. But if you travel through many cultures, I was with a gentleman from Harvard actually the other day in Oman in the Middle East, and we were on a bus to a dinner together, and he was saying, my gosh, Mimi, there's a lot to learn, right, about how to behave in what is a very, in this case, was a very ceremonial, traditional Arabic dinner. So if you cross those borders, then some of these things shift. But on the whole, humans are humans. So if you get some of these principles right, one is eye contact. Body language is a really important one. And for me, I think it's just about openness. So we measure body language openness with two axes, basically shoulder to shoulder and shoulder to ear. So when you have a good space, there you go, look at you, you're like, yeah, okay. Between your ear and your shoulder, this open space here creates trust. Because if I did the call like this,
Oh,
immediately, right, the room changes immediately, even if I'm smiling or whatever. The
it's
minute you
true.
open, right, you're like, oh, she's more approachable, she's confident, I'm safe with her.
Hmm?
And the other one is across your chest, because again, when you're hunching over, subconsciously, what we're showing from an evolutionary point of view is fear. So
Yes.
if you see someone all hunched, maybe you don't trust them, maybe they're hiding something. I know subconsciously that person is not comfortable. What's wrong? So even if consciously you're not recognizing that, subconsciously you are. Same with crossing your arms, by the way. People cross their arms because of discomfort. And that discomfort could be temperature, right? I'm too hot, I'm too cold, I feel sick, I've got a headache.
Yes.
It could be fear. It could be dislike, I don't like this person. But whatever it is, it's some form of discomfort. The human being does that because, from an evolutionary point of view, what we are doing is protecting our heart and lungs, the things that keep us alive. Because when we were cavemen and women, if somebody shot an arrow, they would hit your arm and not your heart. So
Mm.
we are crossing our arms for protection. That doesn't mean the person doesn't like you, right? They might just be really cold or
Yeah.
tired, but it does mean that something is uncomfortable. So if you're in a meeting and halfway through somebody crosses their arms, you can just be aware what happened, what changed, what am I dealing with here? It could be emotional, like I've said something they don't like,
Hmm.
or it could be, the air conditioning's too cold. So those types of body language are small signals you can use.
I love that. I love that. Let me ask you, you talk about that it is the gateway to performance. How do you think, because I've seen this, so I'm probably sure that you have because of your intimacy with this, but have you seen leaders and what do you do to help leaders who confuse empathy with accommodation or even worse, avoidance?
Yeah, like I think the act of empathizing is the act of understanding.
Mm.
There is no judgment and
Yep.
there is no agreement. So the reason I say that is just because you've understood their reality doesn't mean you're accommodating it or that you're accepting it or that you're agreeing with it. It means that you're understanding it. And when we talk about any level of communication effectiveness, whether it's conflict, so the far end of the scale, or camaraderie, right? You're creating connection with someone.
Mhm.
When you're able to understand first, to listen first, you are able to create connection. And then you take that communication on from there, overcome conflict or create friendship or create motivation in the workplace.
Mhm.
So I think the important thing to recognize here is, again, back to the empathy versus sympathy. I am empathizing with you, i.e., I understand your context. I understand where you're coming from. I don't agree with you, but I
Mhm.
understand you. So probably one of the, I don't know, the hardest questions I was ever asked, Alison, to bring this to life. I was working with a counter-terrorism unit at the Metropolitan Police Force of London, and we did a session on this. And in the Q&A at the end, and in hindsight, I should have I should have expected this question, but I didn't. They said to me, "But Mimi, can we empathize with a terrorist who has just blown up a bridge?" And I was like, it's a big question, right? But of course, the answer is yes. Are you going to agree with their actions? Well, most probably not. Are you
Mhm.
going to like them? No. But If you studied that person from youth to now and understood their journey, how did they get to this point? Why are they doing it? What do they believe? What have they been told? What have they been taught? Could you understand how they ended up taking that action? Yes. It's data, Alison. It's human data. And there's no environment in life where more data doesn't create more intelligence,
It's true.
right? You know
It's,
more.
it's true.
You don't have to feel more. You don't have to agree more. You just know more.
Hmm. So in your body of work, and I see everything as a bit of a sliding scale, let me ask you this. What do you think are the first signals that an organization has maybe leaned too far, even with super good intentions, with empathy?
It's a good question. I don't think there is such a thing as too far with empathy.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that empathy with accountability will fail. Sorry, let me say that again. Empathy without accountability will fail.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that empathy has to be in a system
Hmm.
where you are accountable to that understanding in those discussions. So probably if the question were, where does this go wrong? It would be when empathy shifts into too much sympathy, compassion, or kindness. Please be kind, right? We need a kind world. But in the workplace, we do have to be able to balance that, as you said, with performance, with accountability, with outcomes, because we're there to
Yes.
build a business.
Yes.
So I think people and children are the same. I often compare employees and parenting or leading and parenting, right? Because it's the same thing. Children, when they don't have accountability, when they don't have guardrails for their behavior, they can't stay consistent in their behavior, right? Because they don't know where they're allowed to play.
Hmm.
And I think that's the same with any group of human beings. We do better when we have a system. Humans don't like change, right? Very much. We don't like uncertainty
Hmm.
because what that means for our brain is we might die. So when you take away accountability from a group of employees or teammates, you are leaving them open to fear. Again, it's subconscious. And what their brains are saying is, I might die, I might die, I might die, right? Literally,
Yes.
because they
Yes.
don't have a structure. So that's why I say empathy, the ability to understand your people, has to be within a system of accountability. You're
Yes.
here to perform,
Has
and
to.
this is what I need you to do. I understand you and your environment. I want to listen first to you, but then I need you to do your job. So I think they're very connected. It's just a practice in
Hmm.
culture. In some organizations, they build it into KPIs. In
Yep.
some organizations I've worked with, they've built it into their values. So, they have the value of empathy. And often that value will be alongside, maybe empathy, excellence, and innovation, right? So it's within an accountable system because our values are saying
Yeah.
we are demanding excellence, we are
Yeah.
demanding innovation, and we're demanding that you listen first as well.
Hmm. Hmm. I love this, Mimi. It absolutely has to be tied to accountability. And I think where leaders go wrong is they don't do that. They don't have that intersection. So I'll give you an example. I was in a conversation with a, leadership group, and they had brought in a trainer for empathy, and it went a little sideways. No, it went a little
Oh
sideways.
no!
Yes, it went a little
Oh no!
sideways. Because the training was you have to be more empathetic, more sympathetic. So the example was, how do you be empathetic by someone who shows up every single day late because, they just can't get out of bed? What do you do with that as a leader? How do I hold my ground as a leader when I'm running a store, a branch, and a retail outlet, and I've got someone that just doesn't bother showing up. They just can't get out of bed. And
Mhm.
so what do we do? And so the training that they brought in was you have to be more empathetic. You have to understand what is their life like and the challenges that they bring to the table. But the missing piece, which I think is actually the problem in which to solve, Mimi, is tying the two together, is with
Mm.
empathy and accountability when it comes to business.
Yeah, absolutely, Alison. And with zero disrespect to the trainer, right?
Yeah.
Because anyone that is trying to make our world a better place should carry on, right?
Yes.
But, in my opinion,
There's a missing piece in that.
there's a missing piece because what I want to say, like if I let the words out my mouth, I want to say it's ridiculous. That's what's like at the tip of my tongue. Because if I'm running a retail store, right, which I'm assuming they were based on your story, I can't just sit and understand that, you need more sleep and therefore my store is not open on time. So, funnily enough, last week I went to a healthcare outlet for a 9 a.m. appointment. And when I got there, it was shut. Luckily, it's very close to my home. But I WhatsApped them because in Asia, everything is on WhatsApp, and said like, "Hey guys, I'm here for our 9 a.m. You are not, right?" And I waited maybe 15 minutes and they never came. And about 2 hours later, the shop manager messaged me to say, "Miss Mimi, I am so sorry that the lady was late. She was in traffic or something, 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 right? I'm not going to go back to that health outlet, right? Do I understand? Yeah. And I'm sure if I met the lady who had, I don't know, had a burst tire, I would be like, oh my gosh, that's awful. But the reality is you're running a business. And
Mhm.
now I'm not your customer anymore, because I'm too busy in life to go to places that don't open on time. So that's why I say it feels a bit ridiculous to say you must just understand people regardless of
Yes.
any accountability or performance.
Yes.
But there is a way, if that were me and I had an employee that was constantly late, I would have the conversation to say, first of all, I want to listen to you first. I want to understand what is it that is stopping you being here on time? And
Mhm.
that sentence, Alison, comes from neuroscience, actually.
Mhm.
What is stopping you? Not why are you late? Why
Mhm.
am I late? Oh, because my alarm didn't go off, blah, 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 right? What is stopping you being on time? I would start there and I would have that conversation because what that question will do is open up a deeper layer of insight. And as we said, what we're looking for here is understanding. And once I had that evidence of what is stopping this person being on time, I would use that data to say, okay, given I now understand that information, how can I help you make this more efficient for both of us? If the answer is you can't,
Mhm.
then I'm afraid this role is probably not going to work because I work in retail
Mhm.
and I understand this is really challenging for you, but I need you to empathize with me. My store needs to open at 9. And when I don't open at 9, I lose my customers. And when I
Mhm.
lose my customers, by the way, I can't pay your salary. So
Ah,
for me, as you said, there's a missing link.
yeah.
The empathy, which is this insight, this human intelligence, is the ability to understand so that you can perform, not so that you can be wishy-washy and let people get away with whatever they want. So my favorite equation that I say on stage all the time at the moment is AI plus HI, human intelligence, equals ROI. So
Mhm.
if you can embrace technology, like use it, but bring it to life with human intelligence, understand what's going on, then you can drive your return on investment. Because if I now understand this person that's late, and maybe there is a way as a leader that I can actually really support them to fix that. Because, Alison, I think that in the world at large, most people are lacking leadership in life,
Yes.
not just in business, right? In life.
Mhm.
They're
Talk a little bit
coming
more about
through.
that. Share,
Let's
share a little
talk
bit
about
more
that.
like what you see and what you're experiencing in that.
I
I
just
think it's a really
feel,
important
Alison,
conversation.
yeah, I feel that particularly, I want to say particularly women, but maybe that's just because I work with more women. I think that we grew up. So I say we, I'm going to talk about people from, say, maybe 30 to 45.
Yep.
So I guess like the millennials, right? I think we grew up with parents who were in the throes of, it, depending on where you were in the world, the throes of capitalism, of growth, right? They were busy growing the world. And what that meant is, and when you look at the parenting styles of that generation, we were left to our own devices quite a lot versus the one before. And I feel that when I meet most women in the business world, and it is men as well, the questions that they ask for my input on is often not actually the technical questions that you and I are talking about this morning, which are really kind of technical leadership discussions.
Yes.
It's really simple things like, Mimi, I'm the CMO of some big brand, but my biggest challenge is that my son is 21 and he's so lonely that I can't focus on my job because I can't communicate with him and he can't communicate with anyone else. So why I say I think people are lacking leaders in life is that I think people don't have anyone to turn to. So if we go back to the case study in point, right, we have this, I'm imagining it's a man,
Mhm.
this young man who works in retail who can't get up on time. Maybe what he needs from you as a leader is a conversation around how to rethink how he structures his life. And
Mhm.
maybe no one has ever told him. So I don't think leadership is about the business alone. If you are going to lead someone and get the best out of them, right? Get the performance you want to build your business, maybe they just need a bit of advice in a different area because often people don't know how to look outside their routine. They've
Mhm.
only ever known that routine. And in Asia, particularly in South Asia, our education systems are so performance driven, are so academic, right? Places like India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, these countries are so academic achievement based that you get all of these scholars that come out of their universities, their colleges, right? Brilliantly educated people. I mean, technically, probably superior to most of the world. China would be the same. India, right?
Mhm.
Phenomenal, phenomenal technical leaders. They've never been asked for their opinion in their entire life. And now they turn 30 and they're like middle management. And we're all like, can you please think outside the box? And they're like, whoa, nobody in my life asked me to think outside the box. And now at 30, you want me to start?
Yeah.
Right?
How do we even start that?
Yeah. So it's a bit different, I think, depending on culture, but it would be the same in all countries, in America, in the UK, wherever you're talking. If you've had young people who have grown up in systems where they haven't been used to training their ability to empathize, to communicate, to collaborate, to understand others. And then they hit the workplace and they're
Mm.
phenomenal accountants, but they don't know how to communicate with people because nobody taught them. And the school system nor the college system taught them either.
Yes.
And now we expect them to lead with prowess with other humans, but nobody ever taught them how. So that's why I say I feel that there is a leadership deficit in all areas of life, not just performance driven with my actual role. I don't know how you feel about that in America, Alison, because you're obviously there. Like, do you see that there? What do you think?
It so resonates with me, and I think you've actually, I mean, you are so spot on. And then with the advent of social media, you speak about, that demographic. I think about the next generation or like even your daughter's generation. They don't know how to communicate. Conversations aren't these type of conversations anymore. Conversations are digital conversations. They're emojis. They're words that are made up. I find that the younger generations lost the art of communication too. Which
And
if you
and the
don't know
only
how to
way we
communicate, then how can you be empathetic if you don't know how to communicate?
exactly. And the only way we can fix that is to role model it. So
Mhm.
just now, I mean, we mentioned earlier it's morning time here. It's just after 9:30 a.m. where I am. So I came here from dropping my daughter off at school. So just an hour ago, we left the house and one of our family members was inside and my daughter was like, bye, and walked out. I said, no, 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 come back here. I said, stand at the door, turn around, look at her and say, have a nice day, May. And so she does. She's very practiced at this, right? But the only way we teach that generation is to practice it.
To model
And
it.
my daughter's incredibly empathetic, right? But even for her, she's running to school. Bye. No, 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 no. Not bye as you run out the door. Turn around, look at them, and say, have a good day, and then run. But
Mhm.
we have to teach them, you know? So I'll tell you a funny little story about, I guess, 6 years ago now. My daughter was 2 and she was at like a kindergarten. And when I went to pick her up from school, the teacher said, oh, mummy, can I talk to you? And you're like, oh no,
Uh-oh.
what has my daughter done?
I've had lots of
Um,
those conversations with my girls.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and she says to me, so again, so my daughter's name is Umi, and in this story, she's 2.
Mhm.
So this little girl is crying. And the teacher says to the little girl, Umi, why are you so sad? And Umi looks at her and says, I am not sad. I am frustrated. And so the teacher says to me, but what I want to know is, how does she know the difference? Because she's 2. And I've been a teacher for 20 years. And I've never met a 2-year-old that knows the difference between emotions. And I said to that teacher, that's because most adults don't know the difference, right? So if we want young people who can communicate better, the very least of which is to be able to identify the difference between even simple emotions. And
Yes.
most of us don't know. And the only reason she knew it too and continues to know is because I taught her, because that's my passion, right? So you have to show them because we can't just expect people to come into the workforce and miraculously be all these things we're asking them to be,
Mhm.
emotionally intelligent, connected, blah, 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 all these things that we want people to be.
Yes. Well, I find it so interesting that you bring in the emotions of it. So, you have to be able to communicate to be empathetic, but you also have to understand emotions. And I think first and foremost, you have to understand your own emotions. Because I don't think that you can decode other people's emotions without understanding yours. And then really understanding what is emotion or what is anger. Anger, I think, is a secondary emotion. There's something else always going on. That was the tipping point. What led to that anger? That's the problem to solve, not the anger or that emotion. What's behind that? What is driving that?
And
Mm,
nearly always it's fear.
mm,
Nearly, I mean, I
mm,
would say, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, right? But in my experience in the work that I do, I would say like 80, maybe 90+% of the time, it's coming from fear, fear of not reaching this quarter's profits, fear of losing my job, fear of somebody resigning, fear of my boss judging me, fear of being told I didn't do the right thing. We live in fear. And our social, political, economic environment that we all live in around the world
mhm,
fuels that, right?
mhm.
So even when we're not conscious of it, we are being fueled with fear all the time. Instability, currency crashes, war zones, you name it. So
Yeah.
for as long as we live in fear, as you said there, Alison, the emotions that might come up might be anger or disconnection, or they're being rude, or, often with the younger generation, with the Gen Zs, you'll hear people say they're lazy. They're
Mhm.
not lazy, right? They're just different.
Yes.
So that's why, I mean, empathy itself is not emotional or an emotion, but the ability to truly understand people is heightened when you can recognize emotions. If I
Mhm.
can recognize I'm working with the CEO of, I don't know, some huge brand, and I'm sitting at his boardroom table, if I can recognize he's clearly extremely uncomfortable with this conversation, I can change it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If I'm so in my own zone and my pitch and my world and what I want him to hear, that I'm not able to empathize, I'm not able to recognize this is boring him to death
Yes.
and he's entirely zoned out and I carry on, it's never going to work for him or for me. So
Mhm.
yeah, that emotional recognition, I think, is a skill set that we need to teach more people.
Absolutely. And I think it starts with ourselves because if we
Mm,
understand our emotions and if we understand our relationship to emotions and if we understand our relationship on how we communicate and the
mm,
things that we skirt around, then we can show up better and be more empathetic and be more in a position to, as you say, it starts with listening. And so,
mm.
are you listening with your whole body? Are you listening with a rebuttal in mind? All of those pieces that come together. We're so complex, aren't we?
So complex. And I think, when I listen to you, I think potentially one of the things that your audience might be thinking to themselves right now is, how am I supposed to have time for this? Right. But actually, when you're a good listener, and I prove this in my masterclasses, we do like a little exercise. It takes less than 120 seconds. So in less than 120 seconds, you can actually make eye contact, make connection, and really shift behavior and energy in a room. And I always say to leaders, you all have 120 seconds, right? Maybe not hundreds of them, right?
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to make this deep connection or this relevant connection with every person in your workforce every day. But I also think, you asked me earlier, Alison, about the barrier, and I said understanding. But the other is also time.
Yes.
And time is this phenomenal thing, in my experience, that you can create, right? We place our time on the things we value. And the limitation of time goes along that same continuum. So if you put value on connecting with people, it doesn't take long. It takes like a minute or two. You can practice it in a coffee shop, like in a Starbucks today,
Anywhere.
anywhere, especially if someone has a name badge. If
Mm.
you just actually stop the conversation and say, "Good morning, how are you? What can I get you?" And you say, "Good morning, Laura. It's nice to see you this morning. I'll have a latte, please." You'll see Laura go, "Okay, cool." Right? So those moments of connection, that micro behavior can be really, really short. And I just wanted to leave that with your audience as well, because it can seem like, whoa, there's a lot of things to do. But if
Mm.
you're practicing this, you can
Mhm.
do it very, very fast.
Mhm. Well, and I think that what you just gave was an incredible gift because not only is it a great takeaway for us as an individual, but I also think that it's important to realize the impact that you have on other people. And I'll give you a really good example of that because I was at Starbucks this morning, which was your last night. This morning, which was your last, I think that was your last
Last
night.
night. Yeah,
Yes.
I was probably fast asleep.
Yes. And I walked in and I got my Starbucks. And anybody who knows me, I'm always like, "Hello." I'm just that type of person, right? I want to make everyone feel super comfortable. And she very much looked shocked that I acknowledged her, that I said hello, that I said, something about the day or the weather. It was just something pleasant and nice. She had said afterwards, she goes, "That was really nice. Thank you for being nice to me."
Oh, I know. I know.
And I was like, "You just give me the phone number of anyone else who isn't nice to you, and I'll go talk to them." And she, but it's a really good reminder because we, as you say, especially on this side of the pond, we are so wrapped up in ourselves and the things that we need to do and the things that we're chasing, is that we don't realize the ripple effect of how we show up. And it isn't just showing up, as you say, in like the technical leader part of it. It's how you show up as who you are.
Mm. I couldn't agree more. And I think what's really important for people to know as well is that in that moment, right, you're talking about this morning in your coffee shop, not only did you impact her life, but you will have impacted your own. For
Yes.
a start, you now have a story to tell me on this podcast. So the reason I want to say that is for people to know that these connection skills to other humans, yes, they're good for other humans, but they're also good for you. So when you are able to listen first, you are able to build the connections that you need to succeed in your life. So you mentioned there, Alison, this side of the pond, we are all running for our goals and achievements and our own vision. These skill sets will allow you to get there faster. So
Yes.
not only do they connect other people and make their day better, but they speed up your success because connected people win faster. So these
Mm,
skill sets are for others, but they're also for you. We are a pro-social species. So when I look at my own journey from, I mean, literally, Alison, like 5 years ago 6 years ago when I started this, I think I had maybe 300 connections on LinkedIn and an idea, right? And today I get to meet people like you. And last year we reached nearly 5 million people organically just with this content, right? That journey to growth for me, personal growth, has been through empathy, has been through using these skills, right? So the more I connect with others, the more I'm able to understand others, the more my own success also rises. That is not why I do it, but that's not the point.
mhm.
I want people to know that these connection, social skills, and humanity are not about being nice. It is nice, but it is also the secret to success.
Oh, I just love this, love this, love this, love
I love it too.
But okay, so let me ask you this. Let's put a little spiciness into this. As AI accelerates and the complexity increases, how do you remain and what role should empathy play in this? What role should it not play? And how do, in an ever increasing 2D world, I'll call it a 2D world where it's really hard to have connections, how do you show up in that world empathetic?
First of all, I think that as AI increases, these skills will only become more important. So there's probably never been a time when getting this right has mattered more than now. So I think, let's put that sort of stake in the ground to start. It's almost mandatory. If the machines are taking over so much of the process and the efficiency part of the business, that individual contributor role will diminish in structure, and our ability to work together will become more and more important. How to do it, I think, is with intention. And I would say that there's three phases to that. I think the first phase is awareness, which is what we're doing now, right? Raising awareness of what these skills are and why we need them. The second step is intentionality, because these are skill sets. And like any skill set, you have to practice them. You have to want to listen. As I said earlier, this is built into your brain. You were born with it, but you have to choose to use it. So the second step for any leader is to intentionally set about becoming a more connected leader, to become a leader who listens first, who listens more than they speak. And then the third step is accountability, which in an organization we touched briefly on earlier could be about KPIs and values and culture, or in your personal life could be whatever goals you set for yourself to be more accountable to the behavior you showed in Starbucks this morning, which is I want to be connected to other humans. I do not want to be lonely.
Mhm.
And today, Alison, 330 million people say they don't have a single friend, right? The choice to overcome that loneliness is yours and only yours. So that's why I say there is a huge amount of accountability in this. If you want to connect with other people, you have to step out and connect with them. You can't do it from your Netflix episode at home in bed.
No matter how comfortable your bed is, no matter how good that
Oh, I
is.
know.
So, you know what I would love to underpin that? So, for if any of those 330 million people are listening, I would love to be able to anchor it into that you're worth it.
That's so nice.
So, do it because you're worth it. I think that's what people forget or get lost in that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you matter.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. This is why we do hard things. We do hard things and we hold that mirror really, really close up to ourselves and we have really good conversations about, what do we need to improve upon and why do we do it? Like, why do we get so comfortable being uncomfortable? Why is that our process? Is because at the end of the day, it's an investment on us and because we're worth it.
Yeah, and because exceptional things never come from a comfort zone, unfortunately.
No, fortunately, I love this. I love this.
It's
How,
true, right? I mean,
how true.
I think that these skill sets around discomfort, which for me, I always define three of them. So when people ask me about my own journey and how do you do this, and it's really tough. I mean, you're also a consultant, right? Or some form, it's not easy to build your own thing. But even if you're in the corporate world, I think there's three parts of that discomfort. I think there's consistency, tenacity, and patience.
Mhm.
Those are my three markers. Like, when you talk about you're worth it, you matter, this is hard work, get up and do it. Just get up and do it again, guys.
Yes.
Show up. Just show up. Right.
Yes.
And you'll be better than you were if you didn't show up.
Yes, I love this. I just came from a fantastic conference, and we started the conference being anchored into like your word of the year because I think being anchored into things is really important. So I took, a whole bunch of people, and they all had their own words, and so I'm going to ask you because I'm going to share my word because I
Yes.
think words are really important. And when things get dark, because things will get dark, and when things get challenging, which they always, always will, no one gets a hall pass in life. What's that one word that you are going to anchor into that will be it'll help you weather through any storm? So, Mimi, what is your word for the year?
Look, I didn't have one until this minute, but I think it's patience. I think it's always patience.
Mm,
As I said, I have three. So I focus every day. And depending, you talk about, the difficult days, depending on what is difficult that day, whether it's the consistency part, the tenacity part, or the patience part, those three words, I never change them. And depending on the challenge, one will come up more than
mhm,
others. But if I had to assess on overall, I think it is patience because this journey that I chose to take to become an empathy advocate, to travel the world and create more empathy for us all, is a long process, right? I often remind myself this is like a 10-year journey, not a 10-minute one.
mhm.
People want to be famous tomorrow. They want to open an Instagram account today and have 1 million followers tomorrow or
Doesn't
start.
work that way. Success doesn't work that way.
It doesn't, right?
Success
So
does not work that way.
patience is just such a huge asset, I believe, and I think it is really underutilized. We are all in a rush all the time. We're rushing to everything. And my father would have said, that nothing worth having comes fast. And I think he was very old-fashioned probably, but he was right. You know,
Mhm.
there are no shortcuts. So I think however hard things get, and sometimes it's very difficult as a small platform, cash flow and travel schedules and all these things. I always remind myself to be patient. So that's mine. What's yours?
And before I get to mine, I just want to ask you another question on.
Oh,
So I know you think that you chose that word, but that word actually chose you today. Why?
oh,
Yes, you think you chose that word. You did not choose that word, my beautiful friend. That word was
oh,
you.
it chose me. I love
Ah,
that. I'll accept
so,
it.
yes, what is that word telling you? And why did it choose you today?
I'm very kind of aware of that choice. I just think that I have to be patient because this is a lifelong commitment. And I now believe, people ask me, how did you end up doing this? And I don't think I chose this. I think it
It
chose
chose
me.
you.
And I say that all the time. I now believe it took time, but I now believe that I was, I don't know, put on this earth to do this. Before this, I had a really wonderful career in advertising and creativity. And unlike many people who left the corporate world, I don't have a horror story. I didn't hate it. I loved it, actually.
I did
I
too.
loved work, right? And so I wasn't running away from something. I ran towards this.
Mhm.
But like we just said, these things take time. All good things come to those who wait. And time is a funny continuum. Some days those, I guess the benchmarks that I place for myself of success seem really far away. So I know exactly why it chose me today. I think I just have to constantly remind myself that the big picture here is still coming.
Mhm.
And you have to live in all the small moments, all those micro moments. Like I made a friend with you today. If I come over to the States, and I believe this, right? If I
Forever
message you,
friend.
okay,
Forever friend.
and if I said, like, hey, Alison, I know we met on a podcast back in February, but do you fancy a coffee? The chances are you'll say, yeah, sure, let's go to Starbucks, right? So all of these moments of connection are part of a bigger journey. And I think you have to believe in that. So that's why that word chose me, I think.
Isn't it beautiful? It's beautiful, beautiful. Okay, my word this year, I've decided, is
Yep.
irrefutable.
Oh, I
I've
like that. Tell me
I've
why.
decided that this year, I think the word chose me this year. Everyone is replaceable, but not everyone is irrefutable.
Nice.
And so I want to be irrefutable in my own lane.
Yes, I love that. You already are. Now you just keep going.
I'm just going to really anchor into that. Anchor
Yeah, yeah,
that.
just going.
Okay, so lightning round before we end. Are you ready? And I'm just
I'm
gonna,
ready.
I have a list that I kind of prepared because, I kind of fangirled all over you, but I'm just gonna rip it because of who we are. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay, lightning round. What song right now makes you get up and dance?
Oh, that song that goes magical, mystical. I think I don't
Oh,
know who it is. My
yeah.
daughter loves it.
A book that has changed your life.
A Thousand Splendid Suns, which is a fiction book. Phenomenal read.
Mm. If you had a time machine and left a little love note to the 16-year-old Mimi, what would be in that love note?
It would say your time is still coming.
When Umi turns 16 and she listens to this podcast because her mummy is very famous,
Yeah.
what's the message for her?
I am more proud of you than you have any knowledge of.
What's your one hope for leaders right now?
That they can be more joyful in the work that they deliver. I think people are really sad. I would like people to be more joyful.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you for being you. Thank you for gifting us with your time and your wisdom and your heart and your intelligence and your beauty. You are a gift to the world. And so thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. The feeling is totally mutual. I absolutely loved it. And I'm so happy to make a connection across the whole wide world. So thank you very much for having me and sharing your show with me.
Thank you.